G'day guys and gal, they're both big, bold, black in terms of armor, and bad at being War Master.
Mr.
Majorkill.
What you just said is one of the most insanely idiotic things I have ever heard. At no point in your rambling, incoherent response were you even close to anything that could be considered a rational thought. Everyone in this room is now dumber for having listened to it. I award you no points, and may God have mercy on your soul.
Okay, a simple wrong would have done just fine, but
Hello guys, this is going to be a little different than my normal content. I'm currently in between projects right now. As you can see on my Instagram, I'm painting a lot of Warhammer armies for a 500 point tournament that's coming up. I'm also working on another YouTube video that's going to be haha funny meme joke. But I got this video sent to me by one of my friends, and I wanted to react to it. I've watched half of it, and I disagree with a lot of points that are made in it, and I decided, you know what, why don't I make a video about it? Obviously, a lot of people know Majorkill. Majorkill does some pretty awesome content, especially for new people coming into the hobby. Majorkill puts the lore he makes it very simple for a lot of people. You see people like Westhammer doing the exact same thing also. And I'm gonna talk about it a little later in the video, but I do think that is sort of the problem with his videos. Anyways, let's get into it. I will sort of cut the clip in of the context that I'm going to be referring to, and then my point that I'm going to be making to it.
He was a Primarch, handcrafted by the Emperor of Mankind using his blood, sweat, cum, and the essence of a minor warp god.
Which... Okay... What? I know recently in the lore they have added that the Primarchs actually had a mother, and there was a whole group of people working on the Primarch project, like Belisarius Call and a few others. But I honestly could not tell you where he's getting the minor warp god lore. I know there is a meme, not a meme, so sort of a theory within the Warhammer community that when the Emperor went to the warp, before making the Primarchs, he made a deal with the Chaos Gods. But to my knowledge, I don't think that's actually canon. I think that's just a theory that everybody likes.
Abaddon, on the other hand, was just a really high testosterone space marine, a member of Horus's own legion of lunar wolves. Abaddon was very large and strong for a space marine, but Primarchs aren't even comparable. They can one-shot space marines like I can one-shot a 4-year-old with a roundhouse kick to the dome.
Powerful? Again, I'll stop here for my first point. Power is very relative in Warhammer. You also have to reference which time period of Abaddon you're looking at. Because Abaddon's one of those characters, like a lot of Chaos characters, that you have to reference, are you speaking about him in 30k or 40k? Because in 40k, he's massively powerful. But in 30k, he's just sort of a normal space marine, just extra.
Since drinking the Chaos Kool-Aid, Abaddon has become significantly more powerful, but is still nothing compared to a Primarch, regardless of his tabletop stats.
Pause again. It's sort of weird, Abaddon's power level. I'm gonna blame GW for that, because Abaddon's power level is more than Chapter Master easily, because we've seen him beat Marnius Calgar, and he probably could beat Dante and a few others. But we haven't gotten confirmation if he's on the power level yet of a pseudo Primarch. And I'll get into this later, why GW has rebranded Abaddon, and why the community sort of sees a different Abaddon than GW does. And this is because Abaddon's power level is so wonky, because formerly he was like the big bad, but now that we have Primarchs coming back, where does he sit on that power level?
Abaddon has a distinct demon sword, Drachnian, which you could argue sets them apart until you remember that Horus was also a fan of swords.
I mean, I feel like it does definitely set them apart. You wouldn't compare a Grey Knight demon sword to an Ultramarine power sword. This is a very sort of like, oh, they both use swords, therefore people get confused. Ha ha ha. There is no sword like Draknir in all of 40k. Draknir is actually not even sort of a sword. He is a demon bound to a sword.
Horus was a master tactician and leader, able to turn any bad situation into an absolute win, or at least salvage it. For example, when the Loyalists discovered Horus was a traitor earlier than he planned due to the escape of the Eisenstein, Horus was still able to cleanly and easily enact his Isfahan drop site massacre plan, taking out 3 Loyalist legions in a single day.
I'm gonna call a massive bullshit here, because Horus was never a master tactician. He just had a lot of master tacticians around him that he used. And we can see this throughout the Horus Rising books and quite a few of the other books, that he relies heavily on his Mournival, which is Abaddon, Garviel Loken, and a few others. And to say that it was an easy win at the Dropside Massacre is a fucking understatement, because you have to remember, he might have easily enacted the plan, but you also had almost 9 legions versus the 3 smallest Loyalist legions. Okay, they weren't taking in Dark Angels, Ultramarines, or Blood Angels. These 3 were not there. They took on the Salamanders, the Raven Guard, and the Iron Hands. While they did get a Primarch kill, they also had Alpha Legion, Night Lords, World Eaters, Iron Warriors, Death Guard. They had almost 9 legions to 3 legions. And they also had the element of surprise of shooting them in the back. This wasn't a masterful plan that came together. This wasn't like a team, like, oh, I love when a plan comes together. This was a, hey, we have a bunch of Loyalists coming here. Let's have a bunch of armies that are still hidden and not traitors shoot them in the back.
He was able to convince countless bright, intelligent people that selling their soul to hell and betraying the Imperium that they had bled to build was a good idea through pure charisma.
And intelligent people selling their soul to... Do you really think Engron is intelligent? Do you really think Mortarion is intelligent? These people joined Horus not to join chaos, they joined to overthrow the Emperor. And this is another part where his simplification gets very bad, because he's going, Horus is such a charismatic leader that he was able to convince people to join Hell. That's not what he did. He didn't convince them to join Hell. He convinced them to rebel against the Emperor. And in doing so, they joined the armies of Hell. Slightly different. Very different, because people like Mortarion, we see especially within the Dark Imperium series, hates what he's become, but yet doesn't care because he's powerful enough to now overthrow the Emperor. They didn't view it as betraying the Imperium, they viewed it as betraying the Emperor.
Abaddon, on the other hand, was first and foremost a warrior. He wasn't actually very charismatic at all.
He does make a very valid point here of Abaddon's not very charismatic. Horus, and I think that's why people followed Horus so much and thought he was such a good Primarch, is because Horus is very charismatic. He's probably the most charismatic Primarch we have ever seen. Maybe Guilliman can keep up with him, but it's very much implied Horus is probably the most beloved Primarch besides Sanguinius, because he was so charismatic. He had friendships with everybody, I think except for the Lion.
The Great Rift was solid, his battle tactics were shit, as evident by the fact that it took him 10,000 years and a ton of setbacks.
And this is GW's issue with Abaddon, because they created Abaddon when he was first created in Rogue Trader and a few others in 2nd edition. He was the Saturday cartoon villain. So he would just charge up and attack things. He would just He didn't have battle plans, you know, he was the stereotypical villain. But since bringing back the Primarchs, and even around 2007, they completely rebranded Abaddon to be much more intelligent than he was. Instead of having a bunch of Black Crusades, he failed. It turned out that what we thought were his goals in the Black Crusade were not actually his goals, and he achieved all of his goals. One of the goals was getting Draknir, if I remember right. and getting a Blackstone Fortress.
Examples of Abaddon's poor social skills include him trying to convince Talos, a Night Lord, to join Chaos and his Black Legion. Talos calls him a bitch, so Abaddon has a hissy fit, shoots Talos, and then invites the Chaos Gods to try corrupt him.
I'm gonna pause here and make another point. Yeah, Abaddon does not have very good social skills, but then again, it doesn't really matter. Now, additionally, he referenced, and this is one that's commonly referenced by a lot of Night Lord fans, of why Abaddon is a bitch. It's not accurate, because the Night Lord Talos essentially made fun of him in front of a bunch of Chaos forces, and if you're a leader, you just can't let that happen. That's why Abaddon immediately shot him and did a few other things, because you can't show weakness in front of your men. I mean, we've seen Gilliman do it in the Dark Imperium novels to a different extent, but it's the same idea. So why is it now that it's because Abaddon is a little bitch boy? No, it's that Abaddon needs to present himself as a strong leader.
For his battle tactics, I'll give you this example. There was a fortress that he needed to take down, so his tactic was to charge at it head first, lose most of his elite warriors, with himself only surviving due to plot armor. He then hit the fortress with his overpowered sword and won the day.
I do want a citation on this battle tactics, and I know that sounds sort of like annoying, nerdy, but it's just because I want to know what era this book was created that he's referencing. Because of the whole GW thing I referenced earlier, and I'm gonna go back to Cadia for this. Abaddon? If you look at Abaddon in what he was able to achieve since they've retconned his personality, he has achieved a lot more, and he no longer just runs and charges at things. If I remember right, he's one of the few that actually wanted Mark VI armor in the Sons of Horus. However, if you look at old Abaddon, he was essentially just a world eater in black armor. And that's why I want the citation of when did this come out, so we would know which Abaddon we're talking about. Additionally, I do feel like there is a problem with GW's writing to him being a leader, and that's why I'm going to hop back to Cadia. Because I read the Gathering Storm series, and they were pretty bad books. But I think the worst thing that made me mad is that every single time Chaos would win, the Imperium would actually win. What do I mean by this? So Chaos surprised Cadia, completely took out their shipping lanes, crippled both the Wolf fleet and the fleet of the Cadian battle fleet, and took most of the spaceports on Cadia and was pushing to the central of Cadia. But every single time we see any of our characters in the book interact with a Chaos force, they win. They win. We see Cadians taking out Chaos Space Marines, which is not unheard of. But you're told that the Imperium is losing, but every single time you see a fight going on in the book, the Imperium wins the fight. It's even with like the Blackstone Fortress. The Blackstone Fortress was disabled. So then, what do you do with it? Do you let the Imperium get their hands on it because you can't take it back in the warp? Okay, let's throw it in the planet. So it's treated like Abaddon losing a checker game and throwing his fists up and breaking shit, when really it's bad GW writing. Abaddon, with their new rebrand, is supposedly a master tactician, but whenever he did his master tactics, the Cadians somehow would win, even though they were losing. It just doesn't make sense. The books don't make sense.
In a similar vein, after not being able to conquer Cadia through tactics, strategy, or just sheer force, he instead opted to throw a Blackstone Fortress at it like an apocalyptic meteor. Like, sure, he gets the job done, but it's stuff like that which shows why Horus was able to reach Terra and siege it within 9 years, whilst Abaddon has only just cracked the Imperium's first line of defense after 10,000 years.
So I'm gonna throw the bullshit flag on the field here again, because he's comparing Abaddon's fight against the Imperium to Horus's fight in the Imperium, and those are massively two different contexts, because you have to realize the universe Horus came from is radically different than the one we're in now with Abaddon. Horus came from a universe where the Imperium was a lot stronger. However, it was a lot more unified, so any pillars being knocked out greatly affected the everyday operations of the Imperium. This is why we see at Calth how easy it was for the Word Bearers to kill half the Ultramarine Legion. And to give you an idea of how much that rivals Isfahan in amount of casualties between both the auxiliary troops that are here for the Ultramarines and the Ultramarine Legion themselves. Because the Ultramarine Legions were pushing 20 to 30,000 Space Marines. And then you also have the Word Bearers that were pushing to around, I think, 15,000 Space Marines, but I would have to double check those numbers. They had a massive element of surprise. Additionally, Horus didn't really lead the latter half of his campaigns. It was left to both Abaddon, Perturabo, and a few others. I mean, he was, by the end of the heresy, just so hyped up on warp juices that he barely could make a normal, coherent battle plan. He would just run at things and kill them, the thing that people pick on Abaddon for doing, which I will get to in a second, because that is a very important point. Horus had, at the Siege of Terra, had Perturabo lead it. Perturabo led the Siege of Terra. So this idea that Horus was this masterful commander that everybody loves to paint is not actually true. He's just surrounded himself with masterful commanders, and that's why he was so efficiently to get to Terra in 9 years, is because he did something that was unthinkable. He surprised everybody, and he used everybody else. That is radically different than what we see on Cadia and what we see for Abaddon. Abaddon's world has... They already know chaos is coming, they already know traitors exist, and they have to push through a planet that was probably the 3rd most defended planet. There's a few others that would probably take 2nd place. In 1st place is Holy Terra itself. But that is nothing to sneer at. It's like, oh, it's the 3rd biggest. Well, if you're going against the 3rd Olympian, you're still gonna get your ass kicked. This was the fact that he broke Cadia is massive.
The Emperor had left the Great Crusade in the hands of Horus so he could go paint Warhammer minis in peace. He then gave a lot of control of the day-to-day of the Imperium to Malkador, who wasn't a Primarch or an Astartes, despite the fact that he could fuck both of them up with a flick of a dick. Don't fuck with Malkador. Malkador understood that the Astartes and even the Primarchs were living weapons, designed to conquer but not to rule. As such, the Council of Terra was formed, with normal mortal men and women. This council started giving out orders to Horus and the legions. Horus and Abaddon both hated this for slightly different reasons. Horus saw himself as the Emperor's second, his heir. He believed that only the Emperor had authority over him.
So, 2 things he sort of gets wrong here. One that I'll quickly touch on, and then the other one I'm going to have to deep dive into it and fully explain why he's wrong. Horus did not necessarily hate getting orders from Malkador. Remember, Malkador's relationship with most of the Primarchs is a familiar one, is an uncle. You know that one friend that your dad has from college that they still talk and they still hang out? It's that kind of relationship, where he becomes a pseudo-uncle. The second point is Horus did not exclusively hate... how do I phrase it? He didn't necessarily just feel jealous that the Emperor left him because he was his second. He felt replaced. That's a distinct difference. Additionally, and this is gonna get into a bit later in the video, when he references the fall of Horus, it's a bunch of little things that make Horus fall.
Furious that civilians who had never known hardship and war were trying to push the Astartes, the men who had won the galaxy for them, to the side. Abaddon was pretty simple-minded in this regard. The warriors conquered the galaxy, so the warriors should own the galaxy.
Additionally, Abaddon makes a valid point here, and that I feel like a lot of people miss, is that these people that were on the council were nowhere close to being warriors. They never had served, most of them never will serve, and they were trying to direct the Great Crusade, when previously it was directed by Horus and Abaddon and a few others. because that's the point of Horus being the War Master, is that he would continue the Great Crusade and the High Lords of Terror run the daily operations. But the High Lords of Terror started affecting the Great Crusade because they're moving troops around, taking away resources, where they really didn't have the authority to do that.
He was upset at the Emperor's abandonment, and that built resentment. That resentment was what Chaos used to corrupt him when he was wounded with a Chaos Knife. He subconsciously wanted to overtake the Emperor and be the Lord of Mankind, but he couldn't and wouldn't consciously admit it. So when Erebus was filling his head with lies about the Emperor and the nature of chaos, Horus accepted these lies as it fit his desired subconscious narrative, whilst rejecting the truth because it didn't.
So this is very... This is a very dumbed down version and only hitting on one reason why Horus fell. Because Horus did not just exclusively fall because he got stabbed with a Chaos Knife and got jealous of the Emperor. He fell for a multitude of reasons. One of the biggest ones actually is his fear of his sons being exterminated like the Thunder Warriors. He saw what happened to both the 12th and 11th Legions. He knew what happened to the Thunder Warriors. And he knew by the end of it that they wouldn't have a need or a place for the Astartes because they were weapons. Even Gilliman knew this. Most of the Primarchs knew that eventually the Great Crusade would end and they would need to become more than just warriors. But that wasn't a guarantee. As we've seen plenty times before, the Emperor has a habit of removing his trash with his custodians. And that's what really made Horus scared, is losing his legion. On top of being bossed around by people who had no idea how to fight a war. On top of that, his believing his brothers hated him. And one of the best videos, and I'm going to try to link it, is from Wolf Lord Rowe. And he talks about this topic, that when Horus became War Master, he felt like 5 or 6 of his brothers, Gilliman, Lionel Johnson, and a few others, were jealous of him. When it couldn't be further from the truth, they didn't really care, all except for the Lion, didn't really care who became War Master.
He is obviously very tainted by chaos and has accepted boons and power from them, but he hasn't let them take over his soul and free will, or at least they want him to believe that. He saw the decay of Horus, his gene father, as a result of allowing chaos to basically wear him like a meat suit, and he decided that wasn't for him.
Okay, this is again where he's putting his own personal belief within the lore. Now you can easily just hypothesize that he's actually just being controlled by chaos, and they want him to believe he's not. However, that's never been stated conclusively in any form of canon, so I think you can't. This is very disingenuous to add this tagline to the end there, when we all know the deals that Abaddon has with chaos is completely different than the deal Horus has. Horus became the avatar of chaos, all 4 chaos gods. Abaddon is what is referred to as marked by all 4 chaos gods, and it's seen on the tabletop to kind of broken power level, but in lore, it's that he's technically the champion of Chaos Undivided, compared to Horus, who was the avatar of Chaos Undivided, which means Abaddon is getting a different deal than Horus did. Abaddon can completely control his actions, compared to Horus, who was being controlled by the 4 chaos gods at the end. Or at least juiced up by them so much that it wasn't Horus anymore.
Warrior, and the best way to go about that is to fight the Imperium. So the similarities are that they look similar, have similar weapons and armor, both give off the same vibe, both have shit haircuts, both are or were War Master of Chaos, both are genetically related, and both want to bring the Imperium to its knees. The difference is that Horus was a meat suit for Chaos, having next to no free will by the time he died. Horus was significantly more powerful, a better leader, and a greater tactician. Abaddon, despite keeping Chaos away from his soul, embraces their power more than Horus did, using using Chaos Terminator Plate, a Demon Sword, and Chaos Iconography. Horus wanted to rule mankind, whilst Abaddon wants authority to crumble and warriors to be at the top. So for those of you that call Abaddon the Wish or Alibaba version of Horus, you aren't too far off the mark. If you enjoyed the video and you want to support the channel, then buy the Major Kill cosplay.
You are massively off the fucking mark if you want to even suggest that Abaddon is a discount version of Horus, seeing as their goals, their motivations, and everything is different. It's literally just they look similar. It's like saying me and my father, Mr. Skellington, are the same person. First of all, I wear a nice bespoke suit. He doesn't. Anyways, on a serious note, that is a very disingenuous argument to say Horus was a better tactician. As previously stated in the video, he wasn't a good tactician, he surrounded himself with good tacticians, therefore becoming a good tactician. He was not more powerful, and this is where I want to reference Draknir again. If you guys don't know this backstory behind Draknir, from what I remember, Draknir was created by the first murder, Cain and Abel. And then Draknir became such a powerful being in the warp that not even the Emperor could really stop him. He only banished him, he couldn't kill him. And that's really powerful, because the Emperor can kill chaos entities, but he couldn't kill Draknir. Last Hammer did a whole good video on this of the Demon King, and I think that's a very apt way of phrasing what Draknir is, where it's not more powerful than any of the 4 chaos gods, but it's powerful enough to threaten them, which arguably could make Horus on the power level of a Primarch or a pseudo Primarch just due to Draknir alone. But he's also gotten the boost from all 4 chaos gods, and then additionally I think the Talon of Horus is a Primarch killing weapon, if I remember right. So it's one of those few things that can kill Primarchs that they can't heal from. But I would have to double check that. So to say that Abaddon is a cheap version of Horus is disingenuous to the character of Abaddon and Horus. They're two completely different individuals. They just happen to look similar, and that gets people confused. It's sort of like saying Manius Calgar and Cato Sicarius are the same person or a discount person of each other because they both want to protect the Imperium. What Abaddon is fighting now is much more than anything that Horus ever had to fight. This is where GW comes an issue. We created Abaddon and we told him he's one way, but now we're going to say he's another way, and you just didn't understand him the whole time. That is a GW's fault. That is not a Major Kill fault. That is not anybody else's fault. That is a GW writing fault. And I know a lot of people still pick on Abaddon, that he is still that old one, but we all have to realize he's no longer this Saturday morning cartoon. He has had a lot of character added to him between the Horus Heresy books and the Black Legion novels. He's a very much more complicated character now, and to simplify him and dumb him down to being a Horus but less powerful because Horus went to Holy Terra because he relied on other people is bullshit. Because Abaddon is doing this, essentially leading the Black Legion alone. Yeah, you have his commanders, but it's him making the full plans and stuff like that. He doesn't have Perturabo there, or Angron, or any of the other Primarchs that Horus did. People tend to forget with the Horus Heresy. Horus had 9 Primarchs on his side. That is a lot to have on your side. Additionally, he had the Dark Mechanicus on his side, which was either 3/4 to 1/2 of the Mechanicus. Additionally, many systems went to Horus's side, believing Horus above the Emperor. So this idea that, oh, Abaddon's limited forces that took Cadia is somehow weaker than is less effective than Horus's forces that went to Terra is not accurate. It's removing all the context behind why Horus, how Horus actually took Terra, because Horus did not take Terra himself. It was all the Chaos Sons that took Terra. It was only the Black Legion that took Cadia.